my name is Adam. I'm from Pinetown in Durban, here in KwaZulu-Natal. And I'm thankful to have this opportunity to share my life story with you. I was raised in a Christian home. Both of my parents were there when I was growing up, and I had many of the advantages that a lot of people don't have growing up. And I always said later on that in actual fact that made me just more of a fool than anybody else, because I took for granted that which I had, which many people go without. So I attended a good school, we had a good house that we lived in, and at that time in primary school I did well academically. I played a lot of sports. I played first team rugby in primary school, and I think I would usually finish around about the top 5 in school. And I was also attending church. As a young person, I had a relationship with the Lord. I knew God, and it was my desire to follow Him. But as time went on and I grew older, I came to the point of leaving primary school and entering high school. And because I had a gap in my heart that needed to be filled, it became quickly very important for me to fit in with those around me, because it wasn't a popular thing to do well at school at that time, and to be in the top class doing well academically. So I joined with a new group of friends, and it was at that time that I started to do things that in my heart I knew were wrong. The first time I smoked a cigarette, I remember my conscience telling me, this that you're doing is wrong and you know it, and God is not pleased, your parents are not pleased. But I pushed on anyway until I reached a point where eventually I didn't hear that voice anymore. So I quickly became involved in other things. I remember getting drunk and being dropped off at home by friends by the time I was 14 years old. By the time I was 15, I was already smoking dagga. And I made a conscious decision at that time to turn my back on God and go my own way in life. And for the next 16 years, nothing ever went well with me again. A spirit of rebellion entered my life because of the dagga that I was smoking, and also a violent spirit. So I became a law unto myself, and I lived in a lawless way. So I would no longer respect the authority of my teachers. I would no longer respect the authority of my parents. And because of wanting to impress my friends, I also was arrested for shoplifting and also for theft before I turned 16 years old, because I started to do these things to try and prove myself to the people that I was hanging around with. I started to neglect my schoolwork. I had started off in grade 8A. I dropped a grade every year until I failed grade 11. And I also damaged my mind through the dagga that I was smoking and the other drugs that I was using. Because at about the age of 15 years old, I started to attend nightclubs, even during school nights, coming home at 2 o'clock in the morning, taking drugs like ecstasy and LSD, and basically would no longer submit to any authority anymore, even including the law. I realized that I was going to fail matric, so I managed to focus enough on my school to eventually pass. I left some of those habits behind, but I focused more on drinking and going to nightclubs. So I would be in car crashes, I would be in fights. I was arrested for drinking and driving at the age of 18. But I managed to pass matric, but all of the opportunities that I had planned to study engineering as a young person. That was my desire. But all of those opportunities were lost because I basically ended up with a conditional pass for matric. So my bad habits continued, and it was at the age of 22 years old where I first got introduced to smoking crack cocaine. So I thought to myself, I'll pack up everything and go overseas to live in the UK. I thought that if I go to the other side of the world, I can escape from my problems. But as I've told many people over the years, the problem was when I arrived there, 13,000 kilometers away, I was waiting for myself at the airport. So I very quickly fell into doing exactly the same things as I'd been doing before. I went to Switzerland for training, and I had even heard the possibility of promotion with that company. And it was then that I discovered that they were selling crack cocaine in the street where I was living. So what I did was I started going first on weekends. After going out, I'd stop by that house, Then it became weeknights, and that was the time when drugs took hold of me completely, and I lost my job. Now, without a place to go, they took me into their home, so I became involved in what they were doing in the criminal activities that they were busy with. And we were selling crack cocaine and dealing crack cocaine, and I would drive for this person and he would pay me with drugs. So basically I would start at 5 o'clock in the evening and finish the next day when the sun came up, and that was my life for quite some time. And he gave me a place to stay there in his house. But along the way, he wasn't always able to provide me with the drugs I needed, so I started to commit crimes as well. And in the end, I was sentenced to 3 years in prison for committing street robberies, 2 counts of street robbery where I robbed a person at knife point and took their cell phone and money. And I received a 3-year sentence for that. So after a 2-year period, I was deported back to South Africa. And after 2 years in prison, it took me less than a week to go back to smoking crack cocaine. Because looking back, I realized that even to be in prison cannot change the heart of a person. So I was just in a controlled environment for a time. And it was during this time on the streets that the devil started to whisper to me that I should just commit suicide and end my life, because humanly speaking, there was nothing left. I had no more friends, no more family. There was no facility I could go to anymore for help. So I just couldn't see anymore, even with all the cleverness I'd had in my drugging and making excuses and deceiving people. I couldn't get out of this position in which I'd found myself in. So I started to think I'll take an overdose and kill myself. And it was at that time that someone first told me of KwaSizabantu Mission. So I arrived at KwaSizabantu Mission in June of 2012. It was a couple of days before the youth conferences that they have in June, July every year. And when I attended that conference, that first service, it was the first service I ever heard preached at the mission by Reverend Erlo Stegen, and he preached from Romans, "Wretched man that I am, who will set me free from this body of death? Thanks be to Christ our Lord." And I knew the answer to my problem is that I need to make my life right with God. So I started attending the services every day, and I started sitting with the counselors where I received help. I could sit with them and explain the way I had been living, all of the crimes I had committed, the sin that was in my life. They prayed for me, and it was through that process that the hold that drugs had on my life was broken, and the hold that the devil had on my life was broken. During that time, I was also led that there was a girl I should get married to. So I was married 2 years ago to a young lady who grew up here on the mission. She's a school teacher, and we now serve the Lord together. And about it's now 18 months ago, I was blessed with a daughter called Abigail. So I also have a young daughter now as well. And I'm currently have just completed the last exam for articles to be admitted as an attorney. And I'm hoping also to register for a master's degree also in law, hopefully starting next year.